Hi guys, it's Bob from Greybeard Models. Good to see you all again. Sorry I haven't been around for a lot recently. I wasn't feeling well for a while, so I didn't really feel up to doing any videos. And then the last few days it's actually been really good weather here. It's unusual this time of year in southeast of England, but the weather's been really good, so I've actually been out hiking and stuff. And getting some mileage in, training for future hikes. But now I'm back here, back at the bench, do some more modelling and get a catch up on the Ukrainian armoured car that I'm building, and then we go on to some getting the Lancaster finished. But anyway, back onto the armoured car, and let's get some stuff done. Good to see you all again. I'd just like to give you a couple of tips really, if you're building this, because I haven't had a chance to, because I did the still photos, but there's one or two things that you've really got to plan ahead on. Let's find right, this is the parts that I wanted to look at. It's in section 10. There's two brackets. There's this bracket here, part DA6, and this bracket here, DA5, and this bracket, DA10. Now, these fit quite snugly. Excuse me. Right, they fit quite snugly into the chassis. There's also a part I've just spotted. Actually, I should have mentioned it before. When you're building the chassis, it's this part here, DA2, as well. Now later on in the build, get on a few pages to section 15. Later on in the build, in section 15, you get the option of either using the plastic parts in the kit, which are really fragile. You know, they're like that. Let's see if I can find the other ones. I haven't used them, to be honest. There they are, on those sprues there. That, to be honest with you, I would suggest you either use a metal wire. I've used brass rod, which is this stuff here by Albion Alloys. This is a 0.3 brass. The reason I use that is because, well, I've got it in stock. There are plastic rods available. Evergreen do plastic rods, and they do a 0.75mm, 0.5mm, and a sort of a 1mm, but they don't really do down to a 0.3mm. You can get other materials. I've got some nickel silver wire here. That's done over here in the UK by a company, and I don't know who I got those off of, but I do have this one here, which is by a company called Southeast Finecast. But those 0.3 rods are really useful to have, and you can use them to replace the plastic parts here. Makes it a lot easier than trying to trim those off the sprues and then file away all of the nubs, because I pretty much guarantee while you're trying to file away those nubs, you're going to end up breaking it. It's extremely fragile. Now, the point about those other parts that I was saying is they are the sort of locating points here for the ends of the rods. So before you put those parts into place, I would suggest that where the rods go, and you can see them on the parts, where the rods go, you drill them out with a 0.3mm drill, just to give you a chance to locate the rods a lot firmer than if you just try and butt them up against the joints, because they will come apart. Even with the best super glue, really, they'll end up separating during the course of the build. But that's certainly one of the main tips I would give you. Excuse me. Also, there's one or two parts that are fairly similar, where you've got to be sort of mindful of how fragile these parts are. This sort of conrod over the top of the rear axle, that also is extremely fragile part, very difficult to get off the sprue. I managed to do it, and it's here, but to be honest with you, it did have a break. So they're very, very tricky to get off, very, very careful. You have to be very, very careful with them, and they will actually break. But apart from that, most of it's going together quite well. I've got some touch up to do. There's paint, and some of these parts, because of the nature of the construction, you're going to have to paint them before you assemble them. Clearly, the green parts, the undersides, you're going to need to get those painted before we put those in place. So very good. One of the things that made me chuckle was the audible warning device, which is actually there's a hose going in up the steering column there, and there's a trumpet or a bugle which is there in copper. A lot of this engine part I've got to get in and weather yet, but yeah, just at the moment just putting the dashboard in place, and the rest of the inside is now pretty much ready to go. Once I get the dashboard in place, get the steering wheel in place, then pretty much the inside's done. So I'll be back to you in a sec. I've finished a few more things and we'll get a further catch up. One of the things I would say with these kits is because of the nature of the fit, a very, very tight fit, so as soon as you put paint on, they tend to be a little bit difficult, a little bit, a bit close. The tolerances are very, very good. The fit is excellent. So here we are now. This is the next stage that I'm at. So it's a test fit of the body onto the chassis. Everything at each stage, what I've done is painted, and just make sure that I've got the base colours in place for when we put everything together. With these skirts on the underside, these have had a coat of green, they've had a coat of rust. I've got a coat of chipping fluid on them and a coat of green, so that I can do the chipping once we get to the final stage. But I'll just test fit the body again, put the front on. These are all in a position where they're closed, but there's still a lot to do before we go to the next stage of permanently fitting the body. There's stuff I need to add inside. There's some further detail I need to put on the engine, and there's other things. So bear with us. We'll get on to the next bit. Yeah, so one of the other parts that you'll find tricky is in the construction here at the front. The two sides are fitted onto the back of what I suppose is really sort of like the front of the radiator or whatever. But there's this part here, B18, and they have it that you put that in, but you don't stick it in place. That's because it needs to flex. And the reason that it needs to flex round or rotate round, if you go further on into the construction of the door at the front there, you'll see that in the closed variant, this door just sticks into place there. In the open variant, it's on a hinge there, and then that part has to rock forward to locate on the rear of A26. and on the rear of A26 you can see there's a bracket there. Now that has to then locate on the peg which is on that cross piece there. The way that the way that part comes off the sprue, there's actually two nubs on the cross beam, on the cross rod or whatever it is, and you'll find that it's very difficult to file those nubs off to end up with a round rod. Now I found the easiest way to do that was to actually, when you take the part, we'll go back here to the section where you're putting all this together. I found the easiest thing to do when you take this part off the sprue, which is there, was to actually cut out this middle section and cut off this rod. And then what I did, what I have done here, is I took that middle section off of the, cut off the two ends, drilled a hole through there, through the middle section there, 0.3mm hole, and I've used 0.3mm rod, brass rod there, which it goes into the fixing point there and the fixing point there. But what that does is actually leaves this in a position where it will pivot, and also it will slide. I'll do this gently. It will slide on the brass rod, and when you go to fit this door on, it makes it a lot easier to maneuver that so that it lines up with the door. And I think you'll find that it's a lot easier to do that, but obviously you're going to need to be in possession of some 0.3mm brass rod and 0.3mm drill to drill through that bracket, and that in itself is quite a tricky thing to do. It's fairly straightforward, but it's a fairly tricky thing to do. But I think you'll find that that's a better option than trying to locate the kit part and leave it so that it isn't stuck, and get all of these other parts together and then have that in a position that it will flex adequately. I think it's just a lot easier with the brass part. Onwards. So here we've got the next test fit of the body. We've got all the panels done. Chosen on this particular one to do it with all the armour shut, so it's a bit of a shame really, because there's all that detail inside, but I've got the British variant, so I'll do the British variant open with everything open so you can see inside. But this is going to be the Ukrainian version, so I'm going to get all this painted. Once I'm happy with all of that, there's some additional things that have got to go on there, some lamps, and then we've got to do the machine gun turrets, put the wings on, front and rear, the wings on the front here, and the rear wings here. Get all of those on, get the lights on, and then it'll be pretty much, well, it's nearly there. So yeah, now I've got to get the body shell off, and it is a tight fit. Let me just move that over there. It is quite a tight fit. The tolerances are really quite close. If you look at the way that fit has gone down onto the chassis, you can see that it's a really good fit. But you see the details inside there. But for this particular variant, I'm just going to go for everything close, get it painted, get the Ukrainian colours on it, and maybe the British version will be done with everything open. But with everything shut up, the view out is pretty poor actually. There's a couple of little slip openings in there. They're masked up at the moment. Once it's all painted, they'll take the masks off there, and the rear view is through those two slits. I haven't masked those off yet, so they're going to have to be masked off before I do the body shell. But the body shell can come off, and then we can get the paint on it, and then it will slide back on again. We'll get the body shell off, get all of the internals done for the machine guns and the turrets, and then it's pretty much home and dry. So yeah, it's been a good build actually, really enjoyed it. So I'm looking forward to doing the British variant. So onwards, and we'll get closer to finish. Now I thought I may as well cover this awkward bit. Say awkward. You'll notice on this kit that there are a number of rivets that aren't included on the moulding, and that's quite a simple reason for that. It would have been virtually impossible to have moulded the rivets properly around there. The tool would have been so complex it just wouldn't make economic sense to do it. But you will notice that in some places there are rivets. There's two rivets there below the gun mount, and then beside it there's a mark there and a mark there and a mark there, indicating where those rivets go. And the same on this side of the gun port, it's got some marks on it as well. One of the things that you'll also note is that around here on this side is very, very faint rivet marks, or marks where the rivets should go. So one of the things that we need to do is go around and mark these to make them more obvious, if you like. And what I do is I use this. This is, I think it's a darning needle. So it's a darning needle that I've put into a pin chuck, and it's really sharp. You don't want this in your finger, it'll hurt. And it's really good for highlighting very, very fine positions. And I use this a lot when I'm drilling with some of the really small diameter drills, you know, like the 0.3. It's really good at pointing out exactly where that drill's got to go, if you like. So with this, what I'll do is I can just about make out here, it's difficult because I'm on camera, where the next rivet will be, and that will be somewhere around about that point there. So what we'll do is we'll just put a little mark there, and then we've got a join there, and we come round again and there's another mark there. And these are good because once you start marking where these are, it all sort of falls into place. There seems to be more frequency of riveting there and then there than there is on the reverse side. There's a mark there, and there's one there. That's actually a lump there, so we'll leave that as a lump really. What we can do is, if we can get the pin in it, we'll just put a pin mark in it. So we've got a number of positions where the rivets should go. Now, once we've got those, we can look at how it's set up on the diagram. And as you can see, there's sort of 4 rivets coming round here, and then there's 3 rivets coming round here. So the first thing to do is really to get rid of the is to get rid of the seam mark. Sorry, I should have come back in the shot. Obviously where we've made this join, best thing to do, I think, before we go any further with the rivets, is to actually get rid of these seams, and we'll treat them very much like you would a fuselage. It's quite a sloppy joint there. Might be able to release that a bit with extra thin and just move it over a bit to try and get it more even. But we'll get those sorted out and I'll come back to you. So what I do when I'm doing this sort of thing is I use this. This is a piece of oh, excuse me. Right. What I tend to do when I'm doing this is I use this piece of what is it? Polypropylene. It's really hard, but it just has a little bit of give in it, and I use this for my photo etch. A number of reasons I use this. One, it's white, so I can actually see things. You know, when you get to a certain point, some of these photo etch things are so tiny that you know, it's almost impossible to see them without optimizers. So let's look at the rivets. So if we take one of the, as I say, if we take one of the machine gun couplers, I suppose it is, and like I said before, gone round and marked exactly where I want to put the rivets. The difficult bit with this is 3 of the rivets are in close formation here, and the reason for that is they are on the opposite side of the machine gun mount, and the machine gun mount goes into this shape. And if you have, let's pick one up without breaking it, right, you'll notice that machine gun set up, the mount itself with the seat, brackets and everything, they have these small sort of triangular plates here, and on the inside there's 3 rivet marks. So they're really the other side of those rivets, so the position of those ones is actually predetermined. So that, for example, so that goes in there, and they actually fit in there. I'll just do this without breaking anything, but you can see that the machine gun fits in there, the machine gun mount, should I say, fits in there, and that fits in there. Get that down into position, and then the leading mount of the machine gun goes in a little bracket there, but the rivets on this side are to correspond to the fixings there. So, but the principle remains the same. Let's go back to where we were. So we've got rivets at the front, a number of rivets coming round, and like I say, mark the position of the rivet, mark the position of the rivet, mark the position of the rivet, all the way round, so that you've got the positions marked. The next thing to do is slice off. I've just got a small piece of the sprue. There are a number of these on the sprue set. Got another piece here. It's got a number there. I'm not going to count. It's too many. I can't count the high. But then the next thing to do is, one, you need to make sure you've got a really sharp scalpel, and then you can go in and gently just run your scalpel along the rivet, and it will come up off of the sprue, and it's on the edge of the scalpel blade there. And the reason that I use this white plastic is because you can now see the rivet if I can get this on the edge of the blade there, but that's held on the tip of the scalpel. To a certain extent I think it's probably held by static, but that's there. So then what I tend to do, and again this is, I'm not saying this is the way to do it, but this is what I do. I get the Rapid extra thin for the drop on the location, and as you can see it's pulled quite a lot, and I didn't really want to put all that on there, but hey ho. And then we put that on there, and that's into position there. Sorry if it's a little bit out of shot, but I'm trying to do this with the optimizers on and get this into position. So that's that one there. So we've got a couple more to put in there, but that's basically the principle. I'm not going to try to do it again. It's likely to get messed up, but then just making sure it's the right distance from the end. But that's pretty much how to do it. The key, sharp set scalpel blade, and just take your time. You can rescue quite a lot of rivets, and I think so far in the build where I've added rivets around the side of the body here and up the side there around that joint, and some up the side of that joint. I think I lost one, but yeah, so that's how I do the rivets. So let's go on. Wow, yeah. It's amazing how your luck sometimes goes. There's these straps here on the top of this engine cover, I suppose. And looking at it here, there's one missing, and clearly that's fallen off during the construction. But I've just come back to the workbench and just looked down on the floor, and I've actually just found it. There it says. Just found it. Put the light on it. There you go. That part. I suppose it's a good job I've got laminate flooring here in the model shop. But yeah, I can now put that back. That was really bugging me that I couldn't find that. So one of the things I'd say to anyone who's building this, be careful of all these extra little bits of detail, because you can easily lose them. Anyway, moving swiftly on. Let's get on with it. Right guys, so I think that's a good point to end this section. Thanks for watching. Stay safe out there, and hopefully be back soon. Couple of days with the completion of the armoured car. Okay, take care.